So I came across this video as I was scrolling through Facebook, and I thought it was really powerful. And as I was doing some research on Facebook and just social networks in general, that Facebook receives 350 million pictures uploaded every single day on Facebook alone. And I started to think about that number, and that's mind-blowing. 350 images are uploaded on Facebook every single day. Now, I don't want to call out anyone in the room, but with a silent show of hands, who is on Facebook? Okay, right? Okay, or some sort of social network. Now, you can't tell me that out of those 350 million images that are being posted every day, that we don't see that, and that by seeing that, it doesn't spark a feeling of some kind, right? When we see someone else on their vacation again, or when we see someone with their new car, or we see someone, we always see all these great images and great things, and oftentimes we also see negativity, right, that gets us thinking about just about all that stuff. That is influential. The power over influence every day, even in our media, in our culture, right? The power of influence is trying to help shape our identity. What do we identify with? Because if I can make you identify with this product, hopefully you'll buy it. Or if I can make you identify with this type of sport or athletics, you will dive into it, therefore buying all of that equipment or gear, right? It's constantly trying to shape what we identify with. And the actual definition of identity is the fact of being whom or what a person or thing is. And as many people that are sitting in this room are as many identities that are in this room. We all have a different identity. We all have a different perception of life and how we identify to things. Now today I want us to talk centrally about how do we receive the influence from God and begin to more fully identify as a child of God, because that is what brings us all together this morning, is that our identity is in God. You know, it's safe to say that I've gone through a few of my own identity crisis. I wouldn't necessarily call them crisis, but growing up, middle school and high school, you might as well just call that whole thing a crisis, right? So I remember that I navigated some of that, just like probably a lot of us did, and I went through quite a few phases. One of my favorite phases was my punk rock band called Staircase with an I. That's me out front with my blonde hair that I did with hydrogen peroxide in the backyard, right? Just trying to grow that baby out. Oh boy, okay. And then that also kind of led me into I tried the skater thing. That's when Skater Boy came out. It was pretty cool to wear your baggy pants and do your skater thing. And then I also kind of, experimented with the jock thing. But one of my favorite photos looking back is I also thought it'd be really cool to get my lip pierced and my ears pierced and wear cutoff Hurley shirts. I kind of went through this phase. What must my parents have been thinking? I don't know, except a lot of prayer daily for what was guiding me through that. But I just remember how influential things around me were. I went through a phase of maybe thinking I wanted to be a lawyer or a judge, and I kind of went through that for about 3 days, and then I realized that probably wasn't the path for me. But now I can easily and clearly say that I identify as a dad, and I just call that the dad bod. So I rock this one pretty consistently with 3 daughters. My wife and I are pretty busy just kind of in the young parenting phase. But I'm sure that we all have our own things that we've been through that have shaped us. And maybe some of us are currently still navigating those. Because, when we're younger, the approval from others is so very important to us. And it's less important when we get older, but it's still there. It's still very important. And as we navigate through life, we're trying to find that approval from a thing or a group that we can identify with. And I remember in high school, I was going through a phase. I think I just got my license, and I was trying to kind of navigate through my friendships and my friend base, and just on that journey of kind of meeting some new people and trying to connect more at school. And I remember that I started a conversation with this guy in one of my classes, and he was kind of in a group, kind of a cooler group of what I perceived and that I was wanting to maybe get involved with. And I remember we just kind of built a friendship because we sat by each other in class, and then one day he invited me to this party, this get-together thing on a Friday night. And I was like, whoa, here's my chance. You're invited to the big show, right? You've been called up. And I remember that I went out and bought jeans or shoes or something. Like I remember getting something because I really kind of wanted to, make this thing work and kind of get in with these friends. And it was my first impression, so I knew it was kind of a big deal. And I remember that night it was kind of cool because I could drive. So I drove to the house the directions that he gave me. And I remember there were just a couple cars out there. There weren't like a whole lot of cars. So I pulled up and I kind of sat there making sure it was the right house. And it was kind of one of those houses where the garage is out front and then you got to walk kind of along the garage and then the door. And I remember I kind of said, well, I guess I'll just, go walk up there. And I remember as I was walking, I heard people in the garage. They were like playing pool or foosball or something like that. I could hear it and, laughing and kind of just chit-chat. And I said, oh, this must be the place. So I walked up to the door and I remember knocking on the door and I remember it got really quiet. And it was like, shh, shh, shh. And I could hear through the wall. And I remember hearing a voice of this guy, and he said, oh, it's Nate. Just be quiet, maybe he'll go away. And I stood there, and as I was processing through what had happened, I tried to cover like my instant humiliation because I wanted to try to save face, right? I don't want to just have a breakdown right there at the door because then that would be worse because, right, everyone would see that, and I knew that I would have to see them again. So I knocked again, kind of purposefully, just to say like, oh, I didn't hear anything. I wonder if they're here. So I remember knocking on the door again, and it was just silent. And so at that point, I kind of just turned and walked off and had my head held high. And I remember sitting in my car and driving away. And I remember I went and drove around that night because I didn't want to go home yet because I knew my mom would ask me why I was home so early. So I remember purposefully just hanging out until my curfew, and I went home and probably fibbed to her about how awesome it was. But it was to kind of guard how hurt I was. I mean, that really hurt. And the best thing that I could try to do is pretend that it didn't. And, often, if we think about our own lives, we could think about a situation like that maybe, to where we've been let down or where we've been hurt, where our feelings or our expectations have been hurt. And, from that, I've begun to realize more and more that Satan wants to keep us feeling that way, that Satan wants us to stay confused and seeking after the approval from others because the opinions of other people trying to mold us into their image is so powerful. But if we don't form into that image or if we fall short like I felt like I did, it is so hurtful and it's so painful. And it's easy to get bitter and resentful and guilty and ashamed because I felt a lot of those feelings. And I will tell you what, hurting people hurt people. We've probably heard that before. And it's always easier to be negative. And I remember from that moment, I was very hurt. I was in a hurting place. And that was the easiest time for me to then hurt others in order to try to defend myself as I was seeking out who I was and my identity. I heard it once, a really great illustration that life is like a train. And as he was explaining this to us, he said, life is on a train, and there's a track, and it's going one direction. And there's seats over here, and there's seats over here. You have the left windows, and you have the right windows. Now, life is going to continue going down this track, but where you sit and the windows that you look out of are your choice. Because on the left side might be a barren hillside that they had to knock it all down to put the track. It's just all barren and rocky and dirt. But out on the right side is the valley, the beautiful meadow below the hillside. I have a choice. I can either sit and look out this window at all the things in my life that might be hurtful, that might be bringing up all these feelings, or I can look outside this window and find the joy and the beauty in life. Because simultaneously, we go through these things. Simultaneously, we could be full of joy and everything could be going really well, and then in an instant, things could be going wrong and could be difficult. But that doesn't mean that that's just the course of the train. That just means that you're experiencing two things at once. But what window are we going to look at? Because media and culture and things like this, they want to keep us looking out the window of what I need to be this, or what's going to make me feel like that. Here's these new skinny jeans that tuck everything in, right? They make you look really skinny. You need those in order to get the approval, right? You have all these different things, right, that are constantly trying to tell us what it is in our life that we need. And these create thoughts in our minds, right? We start thinking about, you know what, maybe I do need to do that. Maybe I do need to work extra weekends to buy that one thing. Or maybe I do need to dress like that or talk like that or act like that, whatever it might be. These are thoughts in our minds that start really shaping how we perceive ourselves. You know, Rick Warren said it really good. He said, God's thoughts are inspiration, Satan's thoughts are temptation, and our thoughts are stupidity. And it was kind of a good little reminder of, what kind of thought is this right now? Because if it's my personal thought, I should probably just navigate right off of it. But I will tell you this, Satan is constantly telling us things every single day to distract us. And one of the greatest distractions is comparison. Because comparison is the thief of joy. What a powerful statement. The idea of comparison is the thief of the joy that we have, because we are constantly, never ending, caught up in this cycle and this circle of, okay, well, now I need this. Oh my goodness, well, now they need that. Oh, well, Tom just bought an 80-foot boat. Oh, I need to order the 95. You know, or whatever it might be. But it's this constant comparison that then steals the joy out of the very thing of life and the very enjoyment of it. And that's a great tool that the enemy uses that I want to remind us of, just so we're aware of it. But then also, a great tool that the enemy uses in our life is to get us repeating and believing the lies about ourselves. These thoughts that we've created in our own minds of, I'm really not like that. I'm really not that beautiful. I really don't have those things. Whatever these lies are, as long as we can then believe them, and they distract us away from our value and our true identity in God, that is his purpose. He plants these seeds, plants these thoughts in our lives, and then we end up farming them. We end up growing them. We water them, we disc them, we do all of the work to grow the very lies in our minds that keep us in a constant place of trying to figure out this happiness or this joy, the way that we perceive it. Do not allow ourselves to do all of the work. But what are we allowing to shape who we are today? That's a really big statement that we're going to unpack this morning. Is what are we allowing to shape who we are? In 1 Peter chapter 2, I want us to read this verse, and then we're going to break this into 5 parts. So 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says this, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." So the first thing, you are chosen. Doesn't it feel good to be chosen? Because when I was standing at that door that night and I felt rejected, that was extremely hurtful. But I'm sure on the flip side, we've all experienced some joy in being accepted, right? Maybe you've been accepted as the leader, or maybe you've been accepted on that team that you've been trying for, or that promotion, or whatever it is. It feels good to be honored and accepted. But now, how about spiritually as Christ followers? We need to remind ourselves that you are chosen by God himself. That I am completely accepted. I have been completely accepted. We search for acceptance, right? Everywhere, every day. It's so powerful and it's so influential. We have been chosen by God himself. Not only have we been chosen, but God chose you and I before everything. God chose us first. In Ephesians it says this, "Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him." We have been chosen first before everything. And then, you know what goes with that? We've not only been chosen, but we've been made acceptable. Jesus made you and I acceptable by his sacrifice on the cross. In Titus it says, "So that being justified by his grace, we might become heirs according to the hope of eternal life." That hope, that joy of eternal life, we've been chosen for it. We've been made acceptable for it. That is incredibly powerful. But then it goes on to say, our second point, you're holy. What does that mean? You are holy. That means that you and I are extremely valuable. The definition of holy is dedicated or consecrated to God, sacred. That we are sacred to God. Not only are we valuable, but we are sacred to him. Is it just me, or do you have something like an item around your house that is very valuable to you, and it will always be very valuable to you? And if someone asks to buy it, you always increase the value of that item, right? It's that whole thing, my stuff's always worth more, right? So like on eBay, if I put something for $200 and he says, well, I'll give you $75, and I say, it's definitely worth $200, and he says, maybe 12 years ago and half the use, right? Because to them, that's their value. But to me, I value it much differently because why? It's mine. Like, it's my thing. It's my item. Has anyone watched the show American Pickers? With Mike and Frank. It's a funny show. The places that they go to get some of this stuff is hilarious. But have you ever noticed that Mike and Frank usually start off and ask, so how much? And, for a sign, the guy's like, well, probably 5,000. And Mike's like, oh, I was thinking 75. But, so what that does here is that helps establish value, right? Because it doesn't matter how much that person thinks that sign is worth. At the end of the day, it's worth what? It's worth what someone is willing to pay. And if Frank is willing to pay $75, that's the value of the sign. Maybe someone comes later and says, oh, I'll give you $3,500. Okay, well, that's their value of the sign. But they oftentimes ask the value first to gauge how far apart they are. That goes right into, you are a people belonging to God. That's the next point. You're a people belonging to God. That is another reason that we are so valuable, is because oftentimes the owner makes the value greater. On the same show, when they find something that a famous person or a celebrity owned, even if it's the smallest knickknack, like a pin, like a writing pin, if Johnny Cash owned that pin, that's a $200 pin. If Nate Fowler owned that pin, probably they won't take it, right? The value also comes in with who owned that, right? I mean, that's a big deal. Like my guitar, my acoustic guitar, Nate Fowler's acoustic guitar. You know how much that would sell on eBay for? The value of the acoustic guitar. If it was the same guitar and it belonged to John Mayer, how much would that be worth? 20 times the value. I'll even bet you that John Mayer's top E string on his guitar is worth more than my entire guitar, right? It's because the owner can make something more valuable. How much are you and I then worth? Well, look at the cross. That's how much that you and I are worth, because we are children of God. Because we are children of God. Jesus would pay the price to die for us, to make this relationship between us and God once again. The value is in that. And one of the biggest lies that we get from the enemy every single day is our worth and our value as a person. It's one of the greatest thoughts and the greatest lies that we cultivate in our minds, is our personal value. We are accepted through Christ, and we are extremely valuable. 1 Corinthians reminds us, you were bought with a price. Do not become bondservants of men. You were bought with a price. Jesus gave his life, and Jesus didn't die for junk. But Jesus died for something very, very valuable. And if God is our Father, then we are the children of God. Nobody values us more than God values us. My wife and I were watching a movie a while back, and there comes a really powerful scene. And it's based in about 600 AD, and it's in England. And the King of England marries off his youngest and only daughter to kind of an arrogant, young, kind of cocky young man who also leads a small area. And he marries her, and they come up to a point to where this young man has to battle for his smaller kingdom. And he says, oh, we're going to go in there with our army, no problem. So he wants to take his new bride with him so she can witness it. And against the advice from many of his commanders, he takes his bride with him. And he got quickly outsmarted and quickly outwitted. And the enemy, which was far less in number, captured the king's daughter, his new bride. If that happened to any other girl, would all of England have gathered around and taken every dime that they owned to buy her back? No. Would they have sent every man available to go get her back? Nope. But why did they do that? They gathered every dime in all of England and every man to go chase after because the king's daughter was captured. That was her value. And one of the king's commanders says, King, if we give them this much money, they will go and raise up an army 10 times the size of us, and they will destroy us. We are funding our own destruction. And what does the king do? She's much more valuable. Take everything. Give it. I want my daughter back. Now, if we look at the value of human flesh, us, and our children, what must our value be in the eyes of God? Far greater than our understanding. God takes care of us. In Luke, it says, consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? We need to remind ourselves, every time we question our worth and our value, we are a son or a daughter of God. Number 4, we've received mercy. That's why we can call ourselves that. We've not earned mercy. We have received it, and we are totally forgiven. God's forgiveness is total, not partial. Why is this sometimes a hard concept for us? Because we don't do that. Our forgiveness is not like God's forgiveness. You might think you're very good at forgetting and forgiving, but we are human nature, and there is a time where something happens in our lives, and we go ahead and tuck that in the front pocket because we might need that later. But God says this. He says, I am he who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins because I have given mercy. Jesus paid that price. And that is a lie of Satan that says, nope, you have more guilt, you have more shame, you have more jealousy. Look at this person, compare yourself to them. See, God must love them far more than he loves you. But shame doesn't come from God, it comes from Satan. It says this in John, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. There is, therefore, now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Number 5, you're a royal priesthood. What does that mean? A royal priesthood? I don't know that I like the sounds of that. Pretty royal. That means that we are fully capable. If you are a child of God, if you have received Jesus into your life and you've accepted that mercy that he has given, the grace and the love of God, we have now received that relationship by the new covenant through Jesus personally with God. We can now have personal relationship with God. That's this royal priesthood. That is the idea that we now no longer need anyone in between us and God, but it has been paid. And now the bridge has been built. You have your own relationship. What does that mean? What do we do with that? Well, it tells us in Acts to go open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. Okay, let's break that little section down. Receive forgiveness of sins. Done. That they may receive forgiveness of their sins. Not from you, but from me. That they might receive it, and they will be sanctified by faith. They will be made worthy. They will have a royal priesthood as well because they've been sanctified through the mercy and the grace and the forgiveness of me. And a relationship with God. We are fully capable of representing God to other people right now. I don't know about you, but there's been times where I have struggled and where I know there's been opportunities in my life to share the gospel of Christ, and I did not do it. You know why? Because I knew I was not representing Christ very well. And if I tried to talk about God or who Jesus was, that person would probably say, if you're the image of Jesus, I'm not sure I need to hang out with you. There have been times where I've been caught up in that guilt and that shame to where it's just shut me down, where I'd rather not say anything. But I need to be reminded that I am fully capable to say, hey, look, I've sinned. We all fall short of the glory. I've sinned. I do it every day. But this is my life. Here's my journey. I'm trying to walk through it. But we are capable to go out and witness to others the love of God. Right now, we struggle with trying to find our identity in so many other things. But oftentimes we won't believe God. We'll believe so many other things. But oftentimes we won't believe God. We get caught up in the I can't, I'm not this, I'm not that, I need this, I want this first. Thoughts turn into feelings and feelings lie. Thoughts turn into feelings and feelings are liars. You know, I remember I was hunting last season and usually I'm very, very prepared to go. I usually lay out all my stuff alphabetical order. I know how many ounces it weighs because I want to make sure that I'm not taking too much stuff. I don't want leftover food. I want to know how many calories I'm going to burn so I don't take extra food on the trail. Why would you do that, right? It's normal. Maybe not. But anyway, so I went on about a 4-day hunt. I was very tired already. I'd already went through a lot of my supplies, and it was the last day and the last evening, and I committed one of the cardinal sins, right? I went somewhere that I wasn't planning to go. I went somewhere that I didn't tell my wife of. I didn't tell the people who knew that area well. I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go real quick. I'm going to hike up there, see if there's anything, because I don't want to eat tag soup. And I remember it was about 3 o'clock, and I started my journey up this hill, and it was pretty rough. Like, it was pretty rough terrain. I do remember looking back at that. And I got up there so far. 3 hours later, it was about 2.5 miles that I had hiked up a spine of a mountain. That can get you pretty far. By the time I got up there, it was starting to get dusk, perfect time to hunt, right? I went to get a drink of water, and of course what? My water's gone, because I didn't plan that, and I didn't check for when I got out of the pickup. So I had no water. I had one Cliff Bar. I went to check my GPS, and I left it in the pickup. So I went to pull out my phone, which was my backup GPS, and it was dead. Why? Because I didn't charge it. I hadn't planned on making that stop. So I'm up there. I don't know where I'm at. It's getting dusk. I finally say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and head back down. I start heading down, and then, of course, what happens? Lo and behold, a deer standing right there. It's almost this moment of truth, like, well, what are you going to do? And my mind started racing. I know what's going to happen if I do this. I'm going to be out here really late. And I said, you know what? That's fine. I got my knife. I got my flashlight. So I harvest the deer. Everything went well. I hiked over there, and it was about dark at this point, and I went to grab my headlamp, and that was not in my back. It was in my pickup where I left it because I wasn't planning on going back up. So now I'm sitting down almost in the dark looking around this hillside, and I can see a long ways, and I'm way up there, and I'm parched. Has anyone ever been parched? Like, you're at the point of, like, you're almost gnawing on your backpack, hoping like that manna from heaven will like seep out of your backpack, which is probably just sweat, gross. But anyway, I was like to the point of like so thirsty, and I still had to take care of this whole animal. And I remember I finally said, I'm gonna load this whole thing out in one trip because I'm not hiking back up here. Another huge mistake. I overweighed my pack way too much, beyond my capabilities. I picked this pack up with my rifle and all my stuff, and it was so heavy. The biggest, heaviest pack I've ever felt in my life. And I started with my walking sticks down the trail, and it was flat where I was, and I was already like, this is gonna be rough, right? An hour and a half later of excruciating pain, I'm halfway down the mountain. It is pitch black by the light of the moon, literally. I can see kind of the steps of not even a trail because I didn't hike up a trail. I'm on the rim, and the pain is so great. I mean, it is absolutely so terrible, the worst pain ever. But in my mind, I go, no. You can't put this pack down because if you put it down, you're not picking it back up. I knew my body could not pick this thing back up. I was leaning on my sticks as hard as I could, and I started to tear up. And it was exhaustion and pain, and it was the feeling of defeat. And I remember saying, I have no idea where I'm at. This is freaking me out. I'm not used to being this unprepared. This hurts so bad. I gotta leave it, and I gotta come back. And I fought internally with myself. And I remember my legs as though on autopilot. I kept taking steps. Literally, I'm taking steps as I'm saying, just set down the pack. You got to just set down the pack. And at this point, I get to a rim and I say, this is where I am going to die. Nate is going to take his last breath and never see his kids again. My tears start to well up even more, and I say, I can't believe it. I have done what I see on the movies. I get over this ridge and I look down, and what do I see? the silver on my pickup. I literally start crying, and I'm like, yes. Oh, and I'm like having this moment at 11:30 at night on this hillside by myself in the middle of nowhere, and I'm like, yes. And I just keep walking. I remember my pace started to get faster, and I started to get closer. I threw my pack down on the ground. I opened my tailgate. I always travel with Mountain Dew, just sugar. I got to have quick sugar. So I knocked down a Mountain Dew. I take my blue water gallon. I'm like, ugh. It's like a commercial, and I take another Mountain Dew. I'm like, ugh. I take beef jerky, and I'm like an animal, right? Just made my, and I'm sitting there on the tailgate, and I kind of wipe my tears, and I feel such relief. And I look back up and I go, that was not that big of a deal. You kind of just look up and you're like, dude. And then I realized the road goes around the whole hillside. You just walk down and you're going to hit road at some point. But in the moment, what happened? My thoughts and my fear and my feelings, all these things started to lie to me so greatly, and I believed them. I said, this is it for me. This is it. I'm done. But looking back on that, I go, I think I'm going to come back here with my 5-year-old. This would be a great hike. That is the power of getting caught up in your head. When we allow our thoughts and our feelings to define our lives, we can often forget the sovereignty of God in our lives. When we allow our thoughts and our feelings to get out of control, we then grow the very seeds that the enemy plants. And the enemy says, yes, that's right. Yes, you can. Yep, that's right. It says this in 2 Corinthians. Not that we are sufficient in ourselves to claim anything as coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God, who has made us sufficient to be ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter of the Spirit, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. That encouragement. To all of you men and fathers, maybe you're working overtime to make ends meet. You're coaching sports 4 nights a week and on weekends. You're helping with homework. You're trying to maintain relationship with your spouse and your family and your friends, and you're trying to fix everything. You're up late and you're up early. You're okay. Take a deep breath. It's okay. To all you ladies and mothers, maybe you're up through the night with a fussy baby, exhausted every minute of the day, keeping groceries in the fridge, changing diapers while dropping off other kids at school, sporting events, friends, forgetting the groceries in the car that you just bought. You're doing okay. It's fine. You're doing okay. To every person who is hurting and grieving the loss of somebody that you love, for the broken and hurting marriages that are barely hanging on, and to the teenagers that don't even want to face another day at school, to the person who might have to start all over from the beginning, you are okay. You will be okay. Because we oftentimes listen to all the other lies around us, and we don't listen to the voice of God. That you are acceptable, that you are lovable, you are forgivable, and you are capable. The voice of God saying, you are acceptable and lovable and forgiven and capable. You're fine. You are okay. Listen to the voice of truth. But in order to listen, we have to be actively pursuing, receiving his word. Philippians, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Let's pray. God, we thank you. We thank you for this morning, God, as we are reminded that, Lord, that the thoughts, the things in our own minds, the things that we create, God, are not of you, Lord, but the hope and the joy and the forgiveness. God, remind our hearts of that today, that we might just refocus. Lord, we walk a life that is so full of distractions. But Jesus, you walked in your own footsteps. You walked alongside. You forgave, you loved, you encouraged, you equipped. God, and we ask for that reminder today, the reminder of our hearts that we are all of these things to receive the love and forgiveness that you have in our lives. In your name we pray. Amen.